nor yearn for easy praise, but fit yourself some task to do, and well employ your days. From wise and foolish both alike, we should all try to learn, for one can show us how to live, the other what to spurn. Be fair to people when they err, when good your pleasure show, their faults be quick to understand, in judging them be slow. But this above all else obey, it is the best of goals. What you would wish not done to you, do not to others so. Our life, we sing our thanks and praise, for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise, for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. Though I may speak with bravest fire, and have the gift to always time, and have not love, my words are vain as sounding brass, and hopeless gain. Though I may
Good morning. We start our services by ringing the bell and calling us into relationship. We ring the bell 3 times. The first is to call us into covenant to renew and rebuild relationship with those who have gone past. We invoke and incite the presence of this land's forebearers, those to whom we did wrong and with whom trust needs repair. We occupy the unceded land of the Muwekma tribe of the Ohlone Nation. The second bell we ring is to call us into relationship with ourselves and one another, that we open ourselves to the wisdom and the diverse array of perspectives that surround us, that we recognize we are among teachers who help us live in an ever-widening circle of compassion and commitment until we are all beloved to one another. And the third calls us into relationship with our children and our children's children out to the 7th generation, reminding us that what we do now or what we fail to do will be felt by those who come after us.
Good morning. When troubles happen to us, some of us ask ourselves a question that brings great anguish. I can't see a way forward. Will I break down and always stay defeated and never get better? But there's another possibility that one might not see right away. The answer may only appear in after some seemingly futile struggle. A person can break down and be broken open and transformed and emerge stronger, wiser, and more in touch with their purpose and passion, which gives their life meaning. I know this in a very personal way. When I was living with a deep postpartum depression, I couldn't see a way forward. All paths seemed to be impossible. For years, I existed just day to day, unhappy, holding on the best I could with my fingernails. Finally, I realized I did not want to live my life like this, and I sought the help of a psychiatrist to get to the bottom of what was in my unhappiness. When he suggested that I meditate to try to explore my spiritual life, since I had told him I had no spiritual life. It was when I engaged in this that I felt happiness bubble up from within. That was a real different way of looking at the world. My heart was broken open and eventually led to a new career, which you see me here, and has brought great purpose and meaning to my life. Now, when troubles arise, I'm able to ask myself, how will this break my heart open? Because I know that is the best way forward.
One of the things that we do here together is break our hearts open, individually and collectively. We depend on one another to be the people who stand at the sanctuary of one another's hearts. We start each service with our chalice lighting. Originally, it was written by the children of the community and adapted many times. But on the first Sunday of the month, we have taken to explore an aspect of our covenant, an aspiration which we try and live up to. Today is First Sunday where we will do that, and it is designed to remind us of our highest ideals, and to take those ideals and take them from just words and to put them into practice, or to become what we'll talk about today, to become habits of the heart. So please join with me in reciting the words which call us together in this community and with Unitarian Universalists all across the globe. We aspire to be honest. We frame issues for accuracy and understanding rather than distort them for persuasive advantage. That is a pretty good ideal to remember, especially as we move into this election.
Good morning. Good morning. Find some glasses. All right, welcome to Mission Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm Suzette Takei. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a member of your board. We are glad that you've joined us this morning. Unitarian Universalism is a radically inclusive, non-doctrinal, non-dogmatic, open-minded, and open-hearted faith. We are people who are all coming at truth from different paths. We gather together across different identities, experiences, and beliefs to affirm and promote the inherent worth of every person. Together, we see our job as to love the hate out of this world, to heal the hurt in ourselves and one another, and be the change that we'd like to see in the world. We use chat and Zoom or our book near the welcome table to share joys and concerns, personal milestones of importance, which we will read aloud in the service. Maybe you're here for the first time. We've been reaching out and asking people to bring their friends because we think that the world, especially now, needs some friendly places to gather and find encouragement and hope. We have social hour after the service where we get together and visit with one another or in break rooms. The worship host will give you more information about this immediately after the service for those of you online. In the meantime, we put a link to our weekly newsletter in the chat so that you can see all of the upcoming events. We encourage you to join anything that speaks to you. We also put our welcome email, welcome@mpuuc.org, to request a newsletter or other information be sent to you. So a few updates to our board policies. One, we're still requiring masks for in-person events, and we recommend the N95 or KN95. We always have them available here. We also have lifted some of our restrictions due to the cold coming. We've added some air purifiers, and we are now going to allow eating and drinking and events inside Cole Hall. So that's positive. That's a plus. All right, boutique update. It was yesterday. Okay, so I think it was a success. So what does success look like? So I'm going to tell you what I think. I think success looks like people showing up at 5 p.m. on a Friday after a long work week and asking, what's next? What else do you want out of this place? So without my Friday moving crew, this place would not have been ready for Saturday morning. So a giant thank you to Graham, David, Valerie, and my husband John for all the lifting and moving and cleaning that we did. This place was dusted and washed walls even. So with everything empty, it's nice and clean. I also think that we saw success when you looked around and you saw the hall full of people laughing and chatting with old and new friends. We had a lot of visitors, just random people off the street coming in to shop, chatting with us about what we do here, but also just enjoying the day and the vendors that were present. So that's super positive. Success looks like Greg walking around with Julie on his iPad so that she could shop from afar from Reno. Success is our raffle prize winners. Corby, Reverend Greg, Drew, Julie, and Lisa Newstrom all won raffle prizes. So congratulations and thank you for purchasing tickets. I think everyone that came in left with something in their hand, which helps to make the event a success when they can go home with something that they wanted, or maybe didn't want, but they still paid for it. Success is thanks to Valerie, James, Tina, Barbara, Lisa, Dawn, Drew, Corby, Kathy, Steve, Eric, Gail, and the other Eric for all working shifts to man a table, set up, clean up, move items, just helping in general. So thank you for that. And our MPUUC tables were filled with the most beautiful handcrafted items because of so many talented members in our congregation. So thank you to Colleen, Deanna, Len, Annette, Tina, Catherine, Ruby, Catherine Lum, Paul, Barbara, and Alexa for sharing your talents and helping us to raise money. And a huge thank you to Colleen and Deanna, my partners in crime, for planning this event. Without them, it would not have been possible. And lastly, we raised over $2,400 in sales and raffle tickets and vendor tables. So that's really, really great. All right, more information in your week on the Peak or on your bulletin board. And please don't forget to silence your electronics. We are glad you're here this morning, and if you see or hear anything that inspires you, please chat it or share it with a friend. Thank you. Have a great day.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my soul.
What is democracy? Well, here's a definition. It's a method of decision-making within a state in which each of us gets an equal say. That's everyone's voice counts equally. And this is surely a good thing. What could be wrong with it? For the first time since the great dictatorships of the mid-20th century, people are really starting to question democracy. Is it delivering good government? Is it able to change the world in the way we think the world ought to be changed? Plato, the great ancient Greek philosopher, had two arguments against democracy. First, the leaders we get are those who are most expert at winning elections. And there's no reason at all to think that such a person is the one best placed to run the country, especially if difficult decisions need to be made. So the outcome of a vote will only tell us who is the most popular rather than who is the most competent candidate. So Plato asks us to consider a ship making a dangerous voyage. Now, who would be the best captain? Would it be the person who offered extra rum rations, unlimited food, time on the beach, light work? Or the person who was actually an expert in sailing a ship, made accurate assessments about how tough it would be, and be able to get everyone back to safety? Now, in a democracy, it's likely that we'd get the first person rather than the second, and that's not a good thing. And here's Plato's second big problem. Which of us has the time to learn in detail about the big problems of the day? If the electorate are going to make informed decisions, they need to be, well, informed. And most of us don't have the time or the inclination to make ourselves informed. And what happens when we asked an uninformed population to make a decision? Well, you get an uninformed decision. Now, I actually do think these are big problems of democracy. Plato's right that elections are a pretty stupid way to pick experts. Nobody thinks that jobs that require expertise, such as brain surgery, should go to the most popular kid on the block. But maybe this is the wrong way of thinking about it. Instead of thinking of elections as a way to pick experts, although we might hope they do that as well, we should think of them as a way of picking someone to carry forward the will of the people. So we're not picking someone to make things go in the best way they can go. Elections probably would not be a good way of picking a person who could do that. But we're picking someone to make things go in the way we want them to go. And elections are a good method of picking someone to do that. And that's okay, but this only makes the second problem worse. If the electorate's uninformed, then picking someone who'll make things go the way the electorate wants them to go sounds like a bad idea, because the way an uninformed electorate wants things to go may well be a bit disastrous. So what can we do about this? The Irish philosopher Edmund Burke said that we should stop thinking that the job of people we elect is to represent our views. Instead, we elect people to do our thinking for us, to come to a considered and informed view about what is in our best interests, even if that is something we disagree with. Flawed as it is, democracy does start to look good once we consider the alternatives. Absolute monarchies, one-party states, dictatorships of various sorts. Now, even if they are better at delivering government by experts, and even that isn't obvious, that comes at a cost. Now, I wouldn't want to live in one of those countries. I value my freedom too much. Now also, Amartya Sen, the economist, has pointed out that democracies tend not to suffer from disasters such as famine. And it can't be an accident that the more democratic states tend not to go to war with each other. Now also, it's worth noting that democracy is very good at getting rid of governments without the need to take up arms or riot. Although whether such governments are bad governments or simply unpopular governments is still open to question. So, to quote Ian Forster, we should raise our glasses and give at least 2 cheers for democracy.
Good morning. Part of our democracy, speaking up and using our voice for collective decision-making, is the responsibility to be the voice of the voiceless. For the next 4 weeks, we invite all of our members and friends to travel the world together and enter into conversations about love and justice. Our values of inherent worth, justice, equity, and compassion, encouragement to spiritual growth, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the democratic process, the goal of world community, the interdependence of all beings, and the shared commitment to end all forms of oppression, these are not always respected around the world. In some parts, they are only offered when we, those who have privilege, extend our power to help those who are without power. Our influence, our voice, our power are needed. Each evening, we invite you to have a conversation about the people and the places that need our attention in order to experience basic safety and fairness. We ask you to set one extra plate at your table for a global guest and give them the opportunity to fill your imagination about how far our values could reach around the world. Here is a message from this week's guest at your table.
I was born and raised in Rwanda. During my lifetime, our temperature has increased far more than the global average. This was not driven by us. People in the least developed country, like mine, emit 35 times less carbon than those in high-income countries. Rwandans rely heavily on the land, and we are used to coping with the long rainy season and the challenge of our mountainous landscape. But climate change is making things worse, and we are being pushed beyond our ability to adapt. Rain erodes soil and kills livestock. Land degradation affects the whole community, displacing thousands. My family had a small and cozy home, but like so many others, had to live with just their clothes and bags, forced to move to a communal house. The last period of intense rainfall lasted for 5 months. It destroyed roads and health centers, leading to over 130 deaths. These damages are profound. These losses are irreversible. Climate change disproportionately affects rural girls and women. Daily tasks such as collecting water and cooking wood are made increasingly difficult by droughts and floods that wash away agricultural income, leaving them with nothing. Youth-led climate action can bring these stories of loss and damage that go unseen and unheard to the fore.
We have the power and the knowledge to develop solutions, but we need the right financial support. Our call is for developed countries of the world to listen and to act.
We take up a collection on Sundays for the simple reason that our purpose in gathering is more than just ourselves. We want to make sure that the ministries that we need, the ones that infuse worth and dignity into our children, our youth, our programs of learning and leadership, and our ministries of anti-oppression and our work in the larger world, are in place to meet the needs of others. To donate to Mission Peak UU, you can mail a check to P.O. Box 545 in Fremont. You can also use Bill Pay or the bank. You can drop an envelope in the office here at Mission Peak. And envelopes are available at the welcome table if you don't have one. Or you can pay online at our website, our /donate page on our website. You can use a credit or credit card. We hope you make a contribution towards these worthy causes by mailing your check to Mission Peak. You can also use the bill pay option in your online banking or drop a check. Thank you for supporting and sustaining the efforts of our members and our friends. Your contributions make loving, learning, and leadership more possible.
Just a reminder for those who like to have that global conversation at their dinner table. We have guests at your table boxes and these little placemats, which are really more than anything else a helpful reminder for the conversation. We'll also have those links to be able to watch those videos and be reminded of those ambassadors that are all over the world helping us to do this work. And thank you for your participation in that. Each week we come together bringing the joys and the concerns in our hearts, knowing that by opening our hearts to others, the compassion and the consideration of those that we're in community with help our hearts break open instead of break apart. If you have a joy or a concern that by sharing with this caring community might bring resilience or healing, we invite you to share it if you're online in the chat, or to write something in our book, and that we will share that aloud with everyone so that together we can hold that joy and concern over the week to come. If you'd like to drop a stone silently in our stone garden, we invite you to do that while the music plays. And if you have a joy or concern that's more personal, we invite you to give me an email or Reverend Barber an email, and we will set up a personal conversation. These are the joys and the sorrows that are alive in our hearts this week. A joy from Suzette and from so many people about everyone coming together to make our new vision of the boutique a success. And that vision includes just having fun and creating community and raising money. Joy for others of being inspired and appreciating Suzette's leadership and bringing so many people together. For the work of all the volunteers that helped, including David, who played music almost the whole time, and for Colleen's Fudge, which of course is phenomenal and continues to inspire exercise programs. For all of these joys and concerns, for the gratitude and the inspiration and the aspiration that rises up in our hearts that causes us to bring ourselves and invest in community, to participate in this democracy and our election, we are grateful, and we keep our mind, our hearts, our arms, and our doors open. Please join with me in the spirit of this reading. This reading is from Parker Palmer. Parker Palmer, who you might know, is a famous Quaker and famous author who has written a number of books. Today's service, I drew from two books in particular. One is Healing the Heart of Democracy, and the other is A Hidden Wholeness, which talks about how do we live an undivided life. He writes this: "Here is the ultimate irony of the divided life. Live behind a wall long enough, and the true self you tried to hide from the world disappears even from your own view. The wall itself and the world outside become all that you know. Eventually, you even forget that the wall is there, and that hidden behind it is someone called you. Living behind a wall has at least three consequences. First, our inner light cannot illuminate the world and the work that we are called to do in it. When I was young and a professor, walling off my true self from the pressures of the tenure system meant sacrificing my teacher's heart. I found myself lecturing not to help my students learn, but to prove how professorial I was becoming. My teaching was too often guided by the critiques of academic success rather than my own students' needs. I was not teaching by my best lights, and I am afraid that I too often left my students in the dark. Second, when we live behind a wall, our inner darkness cannot be penetrated by the light that is in the world. In fact, all we can see out there is darkness, not realizing how much of it is of our own making. As a young man, the wall allowed me to cast my own darkness on others while remaining blissfully ignorant of how they saw me. I remember with regret the arrogance that overcame me in my 30s when I became privately judgmental of many people I knew, a posture that was, of course, no more than projected self-doubt. From time to time, courageous friends tried to shed light on my shadow with predictable results. I judged them to be arrogant, and I refused to listen. And third, when we live behind a wall, people close to us become wary of us, wary of the gap between our on-stage performance and our backstage reality. Distrusting our duplicity and seeking to protect themselves, they hold us at arm's length, relationships in which we might have a chance to see ourselves more clearly then recede and disappear from our lives. Thus ends the reading. Great thanks to Peak Performers and particularly Drew and Shauna, Drew for producing their work, and for anybody who would love to be in Peak Performers. You have an opportunity. Thinking about the walls that we create from living an inauthentic life, I look back on my life and tried to remember where the divide started. I recalled a couple incidences where I happened to tell friends or classmates things about my life that weren't exactly as I described them. How's that? I had a habit of sometimes telling classmates that I knew famous people that I didn't, that I had performed artistic or athletic feats in which, in reality, I did not and could not. I once took credit for being the artist of a drawing that was actually my brother's work. In my younger days, I embellished. I added fanciful flourishes to stories in order to impress people, add a little bit of intrigue or build up my image. That is the polite way of saying it. Liar is another way of saying it. It was my brother's preferred mode of describing it. My brother did not embellish or mince words even. Even more embarrassing, I discovered that when my stories were questioned, I would sometimes double down, covering up one lie by telling another, sometimes so many that I would lose track. I didn't realize in that process the wall that was growing around me. I was losing part of myself each time I fell out of step with the tango of truth. It was worse than losing face because it was losing something harder to earn back, my own self-respect. I made it as far as 5th grade before I found something that really helped me start to turn things around and understand honesty a little differently. A teacher that I had, Miss Midby, sometimes let us listen to Paul Harvey on the radio after lunch. Anybody ever listen to Paul Harvey? That dates us all. One day, a story came on that left a big impression on me. Harvey recounted a moment from his own life when he took something that didn't belong to him. And because no one noticed, he thought he had gotten away with it. But then he realized that he could never quite account for all of how he made sense of it. He discovered that this thing that he had long coveted, this thing that he thought he would feel proud to own, turned out to be a curse. He realized that when he couldn't bring himself to show it to anyone, because then he would have had to explain how he had gotten it. And every rehearsed explanation that he came up with for that explanation made a sense of smallness envelop him. It was an unbearable feeling, he recounted. Each time dishonesty would crack open a door, a little bit of my conscience and my integrity would slip out. But it was when he talked about his soul that I really took notice. I remember that story partly because I remember the discussion that the class had after listening to it on the radio. When asked how many in the class would have given the stolen thing back, I saw almost everybody raise their hand, which I confess surprised me. And I felt myself getting upset seeing a number of the boys who I had personally witnessed stealing other people's lunches raise their hand. Mind you, I had covered up my own dishonesties, but somehow when I looked at them from a different vantage point, I felt different. And it was connected to the way that we talked about the word soul. Everyone, especially the boys I knew who had been dishonest, said the soul was nothing to mess with. Bad marks on your soul meant you were going to hell. I was Unitarian, which usually meant a much more ambiguous thinking of the soul, if we dared to think of it at all. And yet still I struggled because I couldn't help but feel our soul was different than that. It was more than just a rap sheet. What is soul? Philosophers throughout time have offered various definitions for soul. Some have discovered it as our core or our essence. Thomas Merton called it our true self. Buddhists call it our original nature or Buddha nature or big self. Quakers call it the inner teacher or inner light. Hasidic Jews call it the spark of the divine. Humanists call it identity or integrity. Nobody knows what the soul is, says the poet Mary Oliver. It comes and goes like the wind over the water. But in his book, A Hidden Wholeness, Parker Palmer dares to say that even if we can't come up with one universal definition, we can sometimes have a sense of why a soul exists and what it wants for us. He says, the soul wants to maintain integrity within us, to keep us whole, to root us in the ground of our being, resisting the tendency of other faculties like our intellect or ego to justify or rationalize differences, setting us apart. He says the soul wants to keep us connected to ourselves and to others and to community, but most of all, it wants to keep us connected to our essence, our true self. He says the soul is beholden to the truth, and knowing the truth fully, even when that truth is uncomfortable to hear or uncomfortable to say. And the soul, he says, is above all life-giving. It wants us to pass that life-giving nature on to a world that deals too often in death. In his book, Parker Palmer presents a theology that says that we all arrive on earth with our souls in perfect form, or as a mentor of mine once put it, we are born with a built-for-love nature. But the problem is that we all soon realize, one way or another, that the world isn't organized to speak love in the way that we understand. Our understanding of connection and interdependence is challenged. We see others ignoring our need for attention and acceptance and affection, and we start to wonder if what we're really in is a competition with others rather than a sense of cooperation. And we see things like racism or sexism or other forms of oppression which try and peddle the lie that there is a hierarchy of worth and it's better that we're on the upper end of that hierarchy. And soon we're susceptible to various other social cancers like jealousy or resentment or self-doubt or fear that prompt us to compete rather than cooperate. At that point, things like honesty, which keeps us in a sense of wholeness or integrity with ourselves and others, and empathy, which maintains a sense of connection and equality with those around us, those become challenged. And suddenly things like telling the truth and the impulse to support those who are suffering is then weighed against social advantage. And that's when maintaining our integrity and tending to our soul is in competition with our, what I call, longing for belonging, our quest for popularity and our privilege. When we are pulled from the ground of our being, when we find ourselves questioning the intentions of others or even our own intentions, when we notice ourselves moving through an everyone for themselves world and begin to question whether soul is anywhere to be found, what can point us back to true north? I like the line from Mary Oliver from her poem where she says this: "This is the first, wildest, and wisest thing I know, that the soul exists and that it is built entirely out of attentiveness." That the soul exists and that it is built entirely out of attentiveness. This morning's sermon is really sort of about soul, what we do to grow a soul, and how what we do that diminishes a soul's standing in our life. It's about habits of the heart that help us lead an undivided life and the connection that is possible when we maintain a sense of wholeness in our life. And most of all, it's about everything that depends on that wholeness, that sense of connectivity, things that we can't live without, things like integrity, community, and democracy. At every moment in history, a new generation is born, and they come of age in the same challenge that we're all faced with, trying to hold on to their built-for-love nature and cultivate their sense of integrity and connection, while observing in the world around them things that are confusing, or what we might think of as sophisticated versions of Orwellian doublespeak. And what I mean by this is what I imagine the emerging generations experience when they look out in the world, like at a time right now, and they notice the barrage of ads on TV for our upcoming elections. Now, if you're trying to hold on to your own sense of integrity and you're watching some of the commercials on TV from candidates who are trashing their opponents and talking about our California ballot initiatives with a maligning sense of dishonesty, how is it that you can make sense of holding on to your own soul? I'm thinking of, has anybody seen the commercials for the ballot initiative, initiative number 29 for dialysis? Which, from an honesty standpoint, I struggle with a lot. Showing dialysis patients on the screen, pleading into the camera, asking us to vote no because voting yes will close clinics that endanger their lives, when in reality, the proposition simply requires those clinics to have a nurse or a physician assistant on site to administer what is clearly a medical procedure. But it is a procedure that none of the 650 California clinics, most of which are owned by only one of two companies, want to pay for those personnel. We aspire to be honest. We frame issues for accuracy and understanding rather than distort them for persuasive advantage. We aspire to be honest. We frame issues for accuracy and understanding rather than distort them for persuasive advantage. We took a moment to put that into our collective covenant. It is the fourth aspiration. And we put it in there, I think, because we wanted to be intentional. We wanted to have high ideals that helped to guide us. In a world that is so often and so dangerously deviating from its own center, we wanted to be the kind of community that we could feel proud of, that was guided by those high ideals. We wanted to be the kind of place where people who, when they finally walk through our doors and witnessed us and saw us how we operate, maybe came to the auction yesterday, would say, wow, I never knew a place like this existed. So in a world that is going astray, we want to be the exception of a world that stays true. In 1831, Alexis de Tocqueville came to America from France. Alexis de Tocqueville was an early social scientist, and he was sent here to study our prison system. But in his 9 months traveling through the country and observing the people of Ohio and Tennessee and Georgia, Louisiana, New York, and Washington, D.C., he came upon a number of things that he had always hoped to find but had never seen before in government. In particular, what impressed Tocqueville most was our version of democracy. He had lived through France's experimentation in democracy, but he had never seen what he encountered here in America. His 2-volume book, Democracy in America, is one of the most influential writings of the 19th century. And in it, he shared why he thought this country was exceptional. Americans of all ages, he said, and all stations and dispositions form associations where the heart is enlarged and the human mind is developed. Through reciprocal influence of one person upon another, they have not only commercial and manufacturing associations, but 1,000 other kinds, religious and moral, general and restricted. Americans make associations to give entertainments, to found seminaries, to build inns, to construct churches, to diffuse books, to build hospitals and prisons and schools. If it inculcates some truth or fosters some great example, they form associations, end quote. Tocqueville was astounded because prior to the Second Revolution in France, voluntary associations were virtually unknown in his country. In creating their democracy, France had aligned with what Professor Matravers described as Plato's concern, which said a workable democracy requires an informed electorate. And so in their version of an informed electorate, they made all of their leaders elected by the nobility, by the upper class or those who were well educated. And so when it came to shaping public opinion, all of that was controlled by the elite. But in America, Tocqueville saw citizens providing a counterweight to central power by associating actively with one another and in the process cultivating what he called habits of the heart, those things on which democracy depends. In Democracy in America, Tocqueville cited several habits of the heart, routines of social order, each practiced uniformly by members of society. These he saw as responsible for making our special brand of democracy uniquely possible. It was, in other words, the soul of America. And chief among these habits was our tendency toward voluntary association, which he saw as being demonstrated in family life, creating churches, local town politics and projects, and even reading newspapers to stay informed. All these things distinguished Americans from Europeans and impressed Tocqueville, leading him to believe the general citizenry could comprise a relatively well-informed moral ethos, even if they weren't nobility. But another habit which Tocqueville noted was our strong sense of individualism, a characteristic of society he had never seen in other governments, and he wasn't necessarily a fan. He conceded that such a habit could forge a sense of autonomy and self-determination that could be very useful, but he worried that it might lead people to see themselves as fundamentally distinct from, rather than connected to, the responsibility of being a citizen. Interestingly, one thing Tocqueville admired greatly in our democracy was our sense of religious community. In his mind, it was an association, it was a unique form of voluntary association that because it was explicitly separated from governance, could not corrupt the system toward creating a competitive theocracy. But religious community provided an essential component where individualism met and merged with shared enterprise, and where the soul of the individual and the soul of the community and the soul of the nation could come together better for the association between them. Now, I don't know what Tocqueville would have to say today about our democracy, especially if he happened to be watching any of the commercials that I've been watching on TV. I don't know what he would think about political issues like abortion or public prayer or the ruling that corporations have individual rights of a person. And I don't know what he'd have to say about our campaigning practices, gerrymandering, or our intentionally deceptive political ads. But I do believe that he would be concerned about the generation being born today into such an array of morally questionable conversations, and seeing them as the next evolutionary step in personal conduct and good government. He would hope that they would have some sort of voluntary associations like this to provide high ideals to guide them. And I think even if he didn't use the word soul, he would have understood what it meant, both for an individual to have one and a society to have one. To be reminded of the myriad of other lives that we are each connected to in living our own, and to understand that everything we say and do or fail to say and do affect a sacred balance, maintaining a sense of wholeness within and among all people and the planet we live on. I believe that such a wholeness meant enough to him that he would hope we took the time to tether ourselves to habits of the heart that cautioned us to surrender our high ideals just to seek, maintain power or privilege or popularity. And I believe he would understand the essential tension between the needs of the individual self-determination and the society which depends on those individuals to live cooperatively. That it is possible to remain true to both built for love nature and a justice-centered democracy of the people, by the people, and for the people. But after reviewing all of this and studying and reflecting, the real truth is what I believe in most is you, is the individual people who come hoping to support the high ideals that live within you and to get that support from other people who will remind you of your best selves. Each one of you come here so that you can show up fully, so that you can live out your potential uncompromised, bringing the truth behind those high ideals, which allows all of this to happen. And I believe all of this, our beloved community, that which helps us receive one another in momentary losses and to restore one another into wholeness, I believe this place can offer us acceptance and belonging, the kind that saves lives, and to recognize and engage in the work of repair when we feel our wholeness sacrificed. And I believe the high ideals we cultivate in here can help repair the moral drift out there, and that ultimately we will refuse to be divided when we know how much we need each other and how much we need the world and how much the world needs us in return. As you participate in the democracy this week, I hope we can hold this in our hearts and one another in the week and the years to come. Amen, and blessed be.
every great movement for social change has been animated by people who did serious inner work to sort of constellate, consolidate, and give trajectory to the powers of the human heart, because those were the only powers they had. Everything else had been taken away from them, all external forms of power. And so only by taking the inner life seriously and learning how to access and aim the power that's in us, not only individually but collectively, could any of these great movements for change have happened. The Black liberation movement in this country, the liberation movement in South Africa to get out from under apartheid, in Eastern Europe to get out from under communism, in Latin America to get out from under raw exploitation of many sorts. And those are, of course, ongoing movements. But if you ask yourself, what makes a Rosa Parks, or what makes a Václav Havel, or what makes a Nelson Mandela, who spent 38 years in prison, what makes these people is their capacity to take the inner life seriously and to tap the sources of power that lie within us, that are as important in the transformation of institutions and societies as any of the external powers that we give so much credit to. So our theory of change certainly begins with that work of individual transformation, which we don't force on people. People have to choose that. People have to enter a free and safe space to let that emerge within themselves. That's what our Circle of Trust is all about. But the Circle of Trust is also about a community of folks who both evoke that inner work from each other and then support and affirm each other, bless each other really, in carrying that inner work forward. Because every one of those people I have named, the Rosa Parkses, the Václav Havels, the Nelson Mandelas, needed not only inner work, but external community to help them hold the fruits of that work and face into the challenges of being true to the inner teacher. That's not an easy thing to do, and one needs a community of support in order to do it. So we believe, I believe, that the work we help people do inwardly has consequences in the larger world. I think what we're doing in Circles of Trust for us ordinary mortals, which those three people are too, ordinary mortals, I think we're helping each other reclaim selfhood, identity and integrity, the power of our own hearts, in a way that's held with discipline and intentionality that can flow towards the transformation of institutions and larger social systems.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. We are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place. When we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, and our heart is in a holy place. Then our heart is in a holy place. Then our heart is in a holy place.
Please join with me in reciting these words for the extinguishing of our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts in favor of again.
Friends, one hand on your heart, the other reaching out to the world, restoring the connection that we all need and that we all make. We're reminded that everything we do, we try to rise up from letting those walls separate us from ourselves and from the people around us and from the world that needs us. May we do all that we need. May we step forward and provide all that's needed of us. And may we have joy in the process. May this be our prayer and our promise. Amen.